Karen, can you start recording? Thanks. We're gonna
You're
start
all
our meeting at
set.
7:07. Thank you, everybody, for attending. A couple of, we got some big things on the phone, I think, big things on the agenda tonight. I think I want to jump right in on the, with the campground, since we have so many visitors here. I've had several questions of me over the last couple of weeks. I've had several conversations with people. I've had several concerns expressed, and I have concerns of my own. I was lucky enough to take some time this morning with Rich Waldo, who did allay a few of my concerns. But again, strictly from a financial standpoint, there are still some big gaps for me. And again, so what I'd like to do at this point, if nobody objects, is I'd like to take a minute and update my board on where I have been for the last week and the meetings that I've attended and the things that have happened there, because this is hot off of the presses. I want to start with the last night's meetings, 2 meetings last night. One was the forum for the town hall, which I attended, and one was the Board of Health meeting. I don't know if you have heard yet, but the Board of Health, the DEP has taken the septic issue off of the Wellfleet Board of Health's hands, and it will now be in their jurisdiction. So what that has implications for us as a finance committee, because we don't know what that looks like.
But Kathy, if I may, how come this wasn't found out about before? I mean,
You know what, Stephen, I don't know why that wasn't, and there wasn't a clear direction on that. So there are some questions up in the air. If you can give me 2 seconds, I want to go through a couple of things really quick, and then we can open it up, because I think when we get
Okay.
into discussion, one thing is going to lead to the next, and I'd like to get my concerns from a financial standpoint out there. I have concerns. I had a question from a community member that asked if the financials, and this was something that I think you guys may be aware of in piecemeal, if the financials had been audited or looked at, in the purchase and sales agreement, we were not entitled to see the tax returns from the sellers, which is fine. I did ask, and Fred did ask. Fred came on early. Fred was in some of the meetings, not as a campground participant, but as a FinCom adjacent person. We asked early on in the process, Fred and I, if we could secure tax returns to be audited by an independent accountant to show, and with a couple of specific questions. One of them was to verify the revenue that would be generated by the campground, and that had never happened. So I did have a specific question saying, have the tax returns been audited? Not only have they not been audited by an independent, that we didn't have access to the purchase and sales agreement to see them. What we had access to is what Nancy and Farouk had put together the presentation last week, which was the assumptions from the purchase and sale agreement, and their assumptions going forward on what the revenue piece would look like. Personally, I have some issues with that. I expressed a couple of them last week. So what we are looking at right now, with all of the things that happened yesterday at yesterday's meeting and what we know so far, is we have a $6.5 million purchase. We have a phase 1 evaluation done. And I will tell you, in my experience, when a buyer comes for a mortgage, before that transfer happens, and I know this is a municipality, but if there is a phase 1 that indicates a phase 2 needs to be done, this is environmental stuff. So this is telling us what's in the dirt and what's in the dirt and what's in the ground. The reason I'm bringing this part up from a financial standpoint is that the phase 1 is done. It looks like there's going to be a phase 2, which would be more in-depth soil testing. That cost of that's probably, in my estimation, around $10,000, and Rich can refute me when we get down there. But what that is going to indicate is that's going to indicate if we need to do any soil mitigation, which can cost a lot of money. So the reason in commercial purchases that is done prior is because if there are chemicals in the ground that need mitigation, there is a cost associated with that. And at that point, that can be negotiated between the buyer and the seller. So right off of the bat, the unknowns for us from a financial standpoint is the what's in the ground and what it's going to cost to mitigate that. What is the DEP going to make us do as far as those cesspools and the cesspools, and what has to take place with those? I know that you know, there've been different arguments, some of which you will hear, I'm sure, after I get done with this intro. One of the options on that might have to be that we might have to close the campgrounds. And if we close the campgrounds, there goes the revenue. So the revenue expected, which is an unknown because we don't know, we have guesstimates and we can take the best case scenarios. But if we have to shut it, if the DEP says no, and we have to shut it down, is that likely? I don't know. It may be, but what's our contingency plan for that if we have to shut it down? What's the contingency plan for a mitigation of ground contamination, and what's our mitigation if we have to turn 32 cesspools into tanks and we don't understand that. We don't understand what those costs are going to be. And we can say things like the developer is going to pay for them, but we don't know that either because we don't know who the developer is and it hasn't gone out to an RFP. So I'm just because I have a lot of, this makes me very nervous because there's not a lot of money in the cupboard. You know, what are we going to put off as a what is we going to put off as a town to make this work in the interim 6 years if some of those worst case scenarios do happen? Because again, we're just rebuilding from the last couple of years and trying to get our footing going forward. Think of the things that we've pushed off over the last couple of years because we didn't have funding. You know, we have dredging, we have building needs, we have a lot of other things that need immediate funding that are already under our purview. So I'm gonna stop there. And if anybody else has any questions or wants to say anything at this point, I'm gonna open up the floor to anybody who wants to raise your hand and have a chat.
I'll ask a few questions.
I would love that.
So my first thought is it doesn't give me a lot of peace of mind when a selectman stands up in a meeting, as a selectman did in yesterday's Board of Health meeting, and saying, we don't really know how this is going to work out. This is a total leap of faith. So for a FinCom to deal with a total leap of faith, that gave me pause, for one thing. For another thing, I don't really understand the 6-year thing. That just seems like an awful long time for a town to be a landlord. And I'm still not clear how that's going to work out, especially since it seems to me that with the figures we've been given and promised that this is a profitable operation, because all those septic systems were grandfathered, they really didn't have to put an awful lot of money into fixing up their infrastructure. So I'm a little bit worried about what we're buying. Now, let me also say that I've been trying to convince myself to be behind this thing because I know how important it is to the town, but there are just a lot of uncertainties for me to vote yes on this. And I don't even think I would ever vote no on it. I mean, I was planning, if it came to a vote, if it had to come to a vote tonight, to just abstain because I just don't know enough. But I am for the project, but there are just a lot of unknowns that I would like those fears to be allayed.
So Ira, I think that at the meetings that we were at, that I was at last night, and the people that I've been talking to, that's you're not alone in that sentiment. There are a lot of people, and again, Board of Health had to look at this strictly from a Board of Health standpoint, and we have to look at it strictly from a FinCom standpoint. And having, doing this type of job, I feel very unsettled that the due diligence has quite a bit of big holes, and there's not a lot of room for error, and there's not a lot of room for contingencies. So I'm gonna call on the order. People are raising their hand. Jeff Behrens.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I mean, I guess just a general comment that I really like the idea of the project overall. And I think investing in affordable housing is super important. And could be a really great way to do it. I think this deal strikes me as terrible, this particular deal and the way it's structured. And putting my sort of business hat on for a second and having bought and sold several companies, I feel like if there was a gun to our head, and this is the only deal we could do, we might discuss it and be willing to take on these enormous risks. But I feel like there may be an opportunity here to frankly go back and say, the deal as it's currently articulated isn't great. We need to reshape this deal in several ways. And I feel like the world has changed, frankly, since the deal was started. And I understand why it was structured the way it was back then. And things like pricing of mortgages, things like just the way real estate pricing has changed in the last 6 months, I think puts us in a position as a potential buyer to say, we'd like to do this deal, but maybe under very different terms, and really push hard to get a deal that reduces some of these risks in a fundamental way. I'd love to see it happen, but on different terms.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. Michael?
Oh, no, there. Hey. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
you're good, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I think first and foremost that, when the select board looked at this, it was a land acquisition. So it's obviously would be a much cleaner purchase if it was just a land acquisition and we weren't agreeing to operate the campground for as many as 6 years. That agreement is contingent upon, having a waiver from the Board of Health. So even if this were to pass at town meeting, that just approves the funding of the project to go forward. It doesn't eliminate the possibility to negotiate the terms, because we cannot get a waiver from the Board of Health for the current septic system. So right there, we're in a sort of renegotiating on that particular contingency. And that is hopefully going to get settled in a way that basically allows us to operate it under a, I can't say too much right now because we haven't met on it. And so nothing's certain quite yet on that point, but the contingency really is that we will operate the campground for 6 years under the condition that we receive a 6-year waiver for the Board of Health. And so that not happening means that contingency is not met and that we have either the right to walk away from the deal or to renegotiate the deal with the sellers. Now, that was always a question mark as to whether we would get that 6 years. But part of the reason why it's there is not just a financial reason, although I think conservatively, it will have some revenue generated from that, but also that serves as a workforce housing area for a lot of people in the area. And we didn't want to purchase the land, and nor did the sellers, and shut that down and move everyone out of there. And so that part of the purchase is sort of like, if this works out, if we can do this, we're going to do this. And that's through what most likely would be a lease out. And, that timeline was really based on, how long it would probably take to actually begin development on the project. And also, sort of a negotiating position to say six years, but it's contingent on a waiver. that would allow those systems to stay in place. You know, that's not going to happen, and so already we're in a renegotiating position. Like we can't go forward under that contingency because that contingency cannot be met. So it's going to have to go to DEP, and you know, primarily, like, this is a purchase of 21.5 contiguous acres, and you know, honestly, there is unlikely to have the opportunity to purchase that type of land in the town of Wellfleet, in a parcel that is suitable and has you know, potential access to Eastham's municipal water system, and allows us to integrate a best nitrogen reduction technology to meet our 208 plans, which you know, we're going to have to do. We're going to have to spend money on dealing with nitrogen loading. So all these things are all part of you know, why this is necessary. Ultimately, this is about housing, because what is the point of doing any of the stuff that we need to do as a municipality if no one can live here, and we don't have anyone but an aging population, and we don't have you know, a workforce to work in the businesses here, if we have to have businesses shut down days of the week? I mean, what's it all for?
So, Michael, can I just jump in?
Sure.
I think everybody agrees with that point. I think they understand the need for the housing. And I think what we're trying to narrow down in here in the purview is do the finances make sense? And if they don't, so let's the sewer, right? So just with the septic right now, just
Sure.
in the septic system
Mhm.
standpoint, that there's a couple of things that are balanced off of each other. So we're saying in one scenario that we are going to have income from this property. There will be income. We differ on what that amount of the income is going to be, based on what I took as a very hard line conservative, because it's the fiscal responsibility to do that and look at that from that standpoint. When I do that, there's some revenue, probably not as much. However, if the DEP does come in, and we don't know this is the unknown, is
Sure.
if they come in and say, no, you can't operate this, then we have no revenue. So my question isn't whether we need housing or not. It is, if the DEP comes in a worst case scenario that's, I believe, has to be considered, and say, we don't have this, now we don't have that anticipated revenue. What's the plan B contingency for financing that? And that's where I'm getting hung up. So
Well,
if you don't mind, if I can go to Rich. 'Cause I
sure,
think-
yeah, go. Yeah, that's fine. And
Okay.
maybe we can circle back around. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead, Rich.
I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty lengthy conversation, and I'm happy to have this. I mean, this is very important. 2 days from now, we're going to be voting on something very important for the town, and it's important for us to understand that, you know, when we talk about certain uncertainties, it doesn't mean that we haven't, you know, thoroughly vetted them. Example, the water system. I mean, we keep talking about this water system, the potential of Eastham water system. You know, that's a potential. We can't say it's a certainty, but does it help the argument any if we knew that the town of Eastham has already applied for funding to extend the water system into Wellfleet to serve actually neighboring properties already? Does that help the argument? Because that's the fact. That the fact is they've already taken steps, Eastham, to expand the water system. And you know, us purchasing Maurice Campground is just actually a convenience, because there's a likelihood that they're going to extend that water system in front of Maurice's to serve these other potentials that they're already working on. So yeah, it's still a risk. We don't know. They're still waiting for funding from SRF, but you know, it's a plan that's already in action. So although it's still an unknown, we have a calculated risk. We know that that's working. We know that they want to do it. They're working towards it to serve other area properties, but we just haven't got that, agreement in paper yet. The structure on how that would look like, they would petition the state for fundings, and they would get a portion of a grant, and then they would be left with the debt service for the remaining amount to extend that water system. And the preliminary discussion is that the town, along with the other entities that would be served, would basically pay for that debt service over the length of the service. So if it costs $3 million to extend the water main, it would be whatever required over the 30-year loan that Eastham takes out. It would be the responsibility of the beneficiaries to pay that. So that's the in-depth detail of the water main. In terms of DEP, this is something that has been uncovered due to due diligence. I mean, the working group has really been investigating everything in every which way, and sometimes it's a little frustrating when you still hear that people aren't getting the information that they've been broadcasting, because the working groups have been at every farmer's market with a barcode, a scan code. Hey, scan this page, will take you to our webpage that has a whole bunch of information, and still that information's not getting out there. So it's a little frustrating, and I think a little deflating for all of us that we have this wealth of information on this website that really shows a lot of background, but it's not getting to people. And I think that's one of the key things that we're taking from the last couple of days. DEP. So this site itself has been in violation with DEP for wastewater as well as water. They've been non-compliant in water, they've been non-compliant in wastewater, but they're pre-existing non-compliant. They have been non-compliant in wastewater since 2005. In 16 years, DEP has not put any enforcement order on them, hasn't given them an ACO, hasn't done anything to really stick their teeth into it. Maybe it's because the water quality is good. Maybe it's because DEP is too busy. I don't know. But our conversation with them, what was basically, here's our plan, here's our goal. It's going to take us some time to get there. Do we share the same vision with DEP? Do you think they can work with us? And they said, yes, you're going to be issued an administrative consent order. We're going to require you to upgrade, and you're going to demonstrate to us what your plan is to upgrade. And we have that plan. It was presented to the Board of Health. It has already been presented to DEP, but we'll enter into that conversation, and with the goal of allow us to continue to operate as usual. We'll do all the testing necessary. But if it comes to requiring upgrades to the system, if it becomes cost prohibitive, that puts the town in liability. It puts us in conflict with two agreements we have, an agreement with DEP and an agreement with the owners. And so our goal now is to have discussion with the owner saying, hey, we can't purchase this property and put ourselves in conflict. And we need to be able to understand that, until we actually own the property, DEP is not going to issue an administrative consent order. But when they do, if something becomes cost prohibitive, we need to get out of that requirement that requires us to operate the campground for 6 years, because it doesn't make sense for us to put in 33 tight tanks only to rip them out of the ground in 5 years. It just doesn't make financial sense. So the idea would be to shutter the campground. I mean, that would be the offset if DEP came with that. Our conversations with them would be, that's highly unlikely. I mean, that's not going to happen. They have actually, in fact, told us that a typical ACO, an administrative consent order, takes 4 to 5 years to work the process through. And in the meantime, you continue the operation as long as you're showing progress towards it. So again, it's an uncertainty, but it's been vetted. It has been discussed. And until we get that enforcement from DEP, until we know that conversation, it is an unknown, but it's been a well-vetted unknown. And again, DEP has had that violation order on them since 2005, has failed to act. I don't think they're going to change that in the next 4 years, 5 years, when we're developing a comprehensive wastewater management system for that site that's greatly going to improve the nitrogen just in general in the overall. And they understand that we're trying to salvage housing as best we can in the interim. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. So I'm going to stop there. I'll let someone else speak, but I just wanted to kind of cover those two areas. And then maybe if we come back, I can talk a little bit about the phase 1 environmental assessment, what phase 2 is, and just kind of differentiate between the two if anyone needs some information on that.
Thanks, Rich. Ryan, I would like to actually defer to my board members with their questions first, before, even though you were in line next. So Mo, go ahead. What you got?
Hi, I agree with much of what Ira had to say. I sort of spent the day trying to calm myself down after last night's Board of Health meeting. It's also the timing. It's not what you would do as an individual citizen buying land. You wouldn't operate this way. I guess I'm asking, does this really have to happen this way now? We're being asked tonight to recommend or not. We're being asked Saturday to approve this, and it feels very rushed with a lot of late information. It's not how I would make a real estate purchase. Having said that, I'm glad to hear that this may open some avenues for renegotiation with the sellers. I think that's important. That's a good idea. I am calmed by the facts in the matter of how the DEP operates, what our expectations can be. But there's risk involved here that we need to understand. Frankly, after my calming process, I do feel that the needs outweigh the risks. I'd like to hear more in that vein. Calm me down, for goodness sakes. Calm down town meeting. Be prepared for that. And what is your thinking, particularly Rich, Waldo, about how the negotiations can proceed from there, given that you can't say everything you might be prepared to enter into? But I would like some sense of where do we go from here? I also want to point out that in the worst case scenario, if we made the purchase and the numbers just skyrocketed in terms of the septic issues, we could sell the property. So there is a backstop to my panic, and that's about it. I'd just like to see how we're going to approach this at town meeting. What does the renegotiation look like? Those are the questions I have. Thank you.
So Kathy, I could talk to a little bit about that.
Go ahead. Thanks, Mo. And then Stephen, I'll get you up next after that. Go ahead, Rich.
Mo, we talk about risk, and it's our obligation as a town, as town administrator, as select boards, to bring opportunities to the governing body. I mean, that's what we do. This is an opportunity that came forward. It was evaluated, and it's our responsibility to bring it to town voters to make that decision. Is this the right decision for the town or not? So let's get that straight. If we had this opportunity and we didn't bring it forward to the town, and then this land got developed by a private developer into $1 million houses, that then we'd be sitting on the other side of the coin, getting lambasted for not bringing it forward. So I think the responsibility is to bring it forward. I think one of the biggest risks that I see is that, Wellfleet is a town that encompasses 60 to 70% in national park land. And we have an opportunity to purchase 21 acres of land outside of that national park. There's not going to be a lot of opportunities like that moving forward. So I think one of the biggest risks that we have here is losing that opportunity. If we don't capitalize on this, what's it going to look like down the road? Is it going to get subdivided? Is a developer going to come in? We don't know. Again, that's a crystal ball issue that no one can see. So that is a risk. That's a risk of voting no. It's a risk of voting yes, of the DEP liabilities. And so what we're trying to do is put together a calculated risk so the voters can say, we're okay with that. We know that there's some uncertainty, but we're okay with that. In terms of, I think one of your other things was the negotiation. I guess the only thing that I could speak to about that is it's ongoing right now. It's ongoing. We hope to have something for town meeting. And I think we'll get there. I think we're in good shape. I think we have a good understanding. We'll get there. In terms of timing, is there ever good timing? I will say one of the biggest benefits that the town has at this time is that there is a lot of funding being placed for housing, water quality. Water quality encompasses fresh water, potable water, as well as wastewater. There's a lot of funding opportunities coming down the line. We talk about ARPA. ARPA is funding that's available to this region now, but one thing that I just learned from a call today is in about January, they're going to be issuing the county about $25 million in funding for housing and water quality projects only. $25 million for our county just for those two projects. And there'll be a lot of competition. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of work going around, but there's a lot of focus on that stuff. And once we take ownership of the land, that's where we're going to really do our actions to try to cover those wastewater plannings, cover the engineering plannings, the studies, the visioning. What does the town want? What do we see this site being in 6 to 8 years? And, again, that's an important public process that everyone has to weigh in. Do I think the fallback option is to sell the land? I don't. I don't think you're going to recoup that benefit that you're expecting. You might recoup your cost, but you're not going to recoup the benefit, the long-term benefit of the potential of this site. And I think that's kind of one of those risk things of not knowing the crystal ball is. What that development will look like in the future. So I hope I answered some of that question. And again, I'll leave it for others to add if I miss something.
Thanks, Rich. Go ahead, Stephen. Hi, Richard.
Well-
I got 4 people in front of you. I can see everybody with their hands up. I'm going to defer to my board and I'll go Stephen, Ryan, and then Jeff. So what do you got, Stephen?
Well, where do you begin? The whole thing is pretty much a mess. And it smells, not just because of septic. There's just some big unknowns out there. You're rushing. I mean, we still don't have cash certified. We're not out of the woods with the financial crisis that started in 2019 when Mike DeVasto was chair for the Board of Selectmen. So I applaud people's planning here, but it's just rushed. And again, if, like Kathy, you were saying, when you look at a loan request, the financials just don't support it. So my concern also is, what is the contingency plan? Is there anything, like if we have to put in a septic system, what is the cost of that? I mean, I'm just kind of shocked by the whole thing.
So Stephen, do you want an answer to that septic question? Rich has his
Yes,
hand
I
up.
would like to know, let's say worst case scenario, DEP says, nope, you got to do this by X date. What sort of a system would go in and how much would that cost?
I'm going to throw in my 2 cents and then I'll let Rich correct me. Mitigation, so the first unknown is mitigation for that groundwater, or for that septic issues. It could be tens of thousands of dollars. And we don't know until that phase 2 is completed and you get direction if we need to mitigate groundwater. The septic system can cost upwards of $2 million. Upwards, $2 million, I
Mhm.
think, is a conservative estimate if we have to do something in the meantime. And again, those are the considerations, and I'm gonna let Rich refute that or talk about it. But when we are talking about the financial aspects of this, and again, everybody agrees that we need affordable housing, a place to put people who can't afford to be here. Everybody it's a great parcel. Looking at the finances and going into a project that has millions after the dollar sign is something that we need to consider. And in my belief, in my opinion, there needs to be less unknowns, and that can be taken care of by, let's get the phase 2 done before we enter into that relationship, so we understand if there's mitigation, how much that remediation is going to cost. We never in commercial lending do we do a loan that has a suspected implication for mitigation and pass papers onto it and make the buyer responsible for the mitigation of those funds. So that's just so backwards. The water, if the water has to happen, that's going to be a few $1 million. And again, the timing on this, we're going to push off, in my opinion, we are going to push off other projects like we've been doing over the last COVID years without free cash certified and without having the cupboard filled. We're going to be pushing off other things, roofs. We just spent $2 million for the sprinkler system for the school. We've got a pier that holes are falling, kids are falling through the pier. There's holes in it that needs to be addressed. We've got dredging issues. We haven't finished the tanks. We haven't finished the oil tanks that were out of compliance.
Out of compliance, yeah.
So there's some big ticket items that we've pushed back. And I'm just afraid that if that we're spending money twice and there's not going to be enough money in the piggy bank if the smallest unanticipated issue happens with this. And I'll let Rich go.
I actually had another question for Rich.
Go ahead.
If I could answer the first one, so I don't lose track. If I could.
Go ahead.
I don't want to speak for the board or even speak for this working group, but speaking for myself as town administrator, there is no appetite to upgrade or install a septic system to serve the campground. There is no appetite for that. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of funds. It's just not the intention that we want to go. What we're willing to bring to the table to DEP is saying, hey, give us a little bit of time to start the visioning process on what we want to do with this land, meet with our town residents, meet with our community, and come together with a system or a development, a projection of what would work. And from that discussion, hopefully we can identify a location of where a wastewater treatment system would go. And if we get to that point where a waste system would go, we can identify that. Then we can start offering things like, hey, we can install a pre-treatment. We can install a pre-treatment and basically have a discharge to the cesspool. It's an improvement. And that improvement can also carry over to the future development that we have. So there's no appetite to waste money. It doesn't make sense. And I think the opportunities to put these things in the ground are available through these funding sources. So, these are the things that we're going to talk to DEP and they're going to understand. I think that they're going to understand the long-term projection of it. This is our end goal. How we get there is something that needs to be negotiated. So I'll leave it at that. And, anyone else wants
Okay, so yeah, there's still some unknown expenses is basically what you're saying. Now, are you aware that the town owns 40 acres within the seashore?
Actually, I was made aware of that last night. Well, I shouldn't
Okay.
say, I knew that strip of land existed, but I didn't know it had come up in 2017 or 2007 for a discussion.
Right, and there's also been monies appropriated to a study to see if the town can have access to it. Those monies were encumbered. Are you aware of that?
I don't. I'm not
Okay,
aware of that.
I'd
I don't
suggest
know
you
the
talk to
details.
Alfred Picard on that. So
Yeah.
you're saying the argument that there's no large plots of land in Wellfleet available for affordable housing is not correct. Because we currently own 40 acres within the seashore. And to me, I know people say, oh, the seashore, they're not going to negotiate with you. I don't care. I care about the town. And we should enter into that negotiation because that's 40 acres of property we already own. We don't have to purchase it.
You know, and I don't disagree with you there. I believe there's some questions about the title and the ownership and whether there's frontage and stuff like
Right,
that.
and that's why monies were appropriated for a study so that lawyers can look at it and come back to the town and say, okay, this is what it's really about. This is what you own. This is what you have to do to have access to it. And that's what the cost will be.
And you know,
I personally would, as a resident and taxpayer, I'd like to see that avenue pursued as opposed to this, which everybody's intentions are all well and good, but it's not affordable. And it just has too many unknowns going down the pipe.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm gonna let Ryan go. Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Ryan.
So I'll address Stephen's question there first. So the legislation that founded the National Seashore and established a minimum lot size of 3 acres. So where the town does own a couple parcels, you know, large parcels in the seashore, our ability to develop them is really restricted. It's 3 acre parcels and they have to be single family homes. You know, if you say there's, you know, the landing strip is, you know, 40 plus acres, you're talking about 13 homes. That's all you would get out of it if it was developable. So, you know, there is and if we were to trade land with the park, the only land that the park has to trade besides, you know, actually dealing with that negotiation would be other parcels that are within the national park. They actually can't own anything outside of the park. So we would run into the same restriction. In terms of, there really aren't any other parcels that are equivalent to this one left in town. The only other one is the movie theater. That's literally the only other parcel that is similar. In terms of the cost, you know, it's a fair price for the property. Even for the year-to-date sales, well, I know nationally there's been tightening or you know, a leveling off of the increases that we're seeing in property values. It's not occurring here. Compared to 2020, so 2021, the median sale price was 800,000. For 2022, for the year to date, it's 878,000 now. So it's just continuing to increase. In terms of what's the worst case, the worst case is not we're going to be forced to install a septic system. The worst case would be we are forced to close the campground. And that is the way to minimize the financial risk that the town would bear. If we were to close the campground immediately, the difference to a median house, so for a median valued house with the campground operations, with what we've projected, the overall cost would be $54.78 or 79 or $54.79 per median house. If we were to close the campground from day one, the cost then would be $58.45. So a little bit under $4 is the difference for a median priced house. In terms of so What is
Ryan, can
drive?
I ask you, Ryan, can I interrupt and ask you, when you just did that calculation, what were you basing the decrease in the revenue from the campground on? Because you just amortized, you just took that.
I took all revenue for the campground out.
So what number were you using for campground revenue?
Over 6 years,
It's $96,000 a year in the model that Ryan produced, and it maxed out at 500,000 for the model in terms of what's the impact on the tax.
No, I'm
The
talking about,
tax
no,
rate.
I understand what he calculated. I just went, you just calculated based on removing a revenue number. You
No.
converted it.
No, an
so-
income number.
Okay, all right, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Yep.
go ahead.
in terms of some of the costs, no property is ever perfect. We've largely done a large amount of the due diligence. Yes, we're going to do a phase 2 site assessment. Rich will be able to speak more about that. In terms of a wastewater treatment facility there, any development that will go in there will have a wastewater treatment facility. And so we're hoping that, similar to 95 Lawrence Road, we develop a wastewater treatment facility there that serves the end use, which is housing, and the surrounding properties, and moves us in the right direction in terms of our wastewater planning. We do not own any land in South Wellfleet that we can use to site a wastewater treatment facility. So this is another opportunity to address that outstanding need. In terms of the costs, the indirect costs that the town is bearing now from the lack of housing is we have unfilled positions, and we have to pay more to have people come and work for the town because they cannot find housing. So we're seeing rapidly escalating personnel costs to recruit qualified personnel because there's no place for them to live. That's what's on the line. And I would hope that you're able to support this on town meeting. And in terms of timing, we spent a year in negotiations with the Gauthiers. We announced the purchase in April. It is September, so it's been roughly 5 months. It's common. So with municipalities, I had other people that are involved in other municipalities say it's uncommon that a community's done the amount of due diligence that has been done on this property to date before going to the voters for approval.
Can
So
I
just
interrupt there
wanna
for a
make that
second? If that were true, Ryan, there would be, all these issues would be pretty clear to the voters by now. All right, so yeah, a lot of people did do a lot of work on it.
So, I mean, there was an extensive community outreach. I'm sorry if some people were not, the information didn't get as wide as we had obviously hoped. And again, in terms of the DEP, nobody caught that until last week. That includes the town
Okay, so
staff.
can I comment on that? Because that would have been a priority as far as I was concerned.
1 second. So it's actually a good avenue for the town is through the DEP, because they'll ensure that it's consistent with our overall objectives and their overall objectives. And if it becomes too expensive, then we would likely close the campground.
Okay, Ryan, let me just jump in. Stephen, let me jump in here for a minute, because I want to get back, we've used pretty much half of our meeting. I want my board's questions to be answered, but I want to remember that we need to stick to the financial aspects of this.
Yes.
And I'd like to stay on top of having you know, if we're gonna talk about, you know, again, I want to go back to Rich in a minute. I want to take Jeff. and
Yeah,
then
go
Michael.
ahead. I don't,
But I
Yeah.
want to stick to, you know, the questions are, how much is this going to cost? And the answers basically at this point are, this is what we've anticipated and this is the contingency. So I'd really like to, I'd like to stick to that, and I'm gonna, just so we don't, because we can go way far afield. Jeff had his hand up for a long time. It's probably pretty tired. Jeff, go ahead.
I'm glad the computer holds it up for me. So I guess it's a, I don't know if it's a question, but some of this you maybe can't answer in this kind of form, but in terms of negotiation, but the kind of thing I'd love to see is, frankly, I've been very impressed by the quality of the diligence that's been done to date. I don't think it's complete, but it feels like a lot of hard work has been done. A lot of information has been unearthed. I would feel so much better about this kind of a deal with sort of two things being true: that the diligence is complete, and frankly, we certified free cash and have got ourselves in a financially good position. And I wonder if there are negotiating opportunities. For example, could we buy an option for the next year, or maybe even 2 years, say we'd like to do this deal? We have more homework to do, both internally and with this opportunity. But for, I don't know, $100,000, whatever, a year, for 1 or 2 years, we want to keep this property off the market with an exclusive right to finalize a deal, and then give ourselves more to basically spend a little bit of money, relatively speaking, to buy the time to finish the diligence and really cross all the T's, dot all the I's, maybe even find a developer that can walk in with us at the closing of the deal. And that may take another year or two, and maybe we can pay to buy that time. And that's one, and there are other strategies I'm sure that you guys have thought about, but I feel like I'd love to see those things in place, and then to go forward, we'd be really excited.
I think what I'm feeling is the same kind of thing that I've heard at the rest of the meetings, that, you know, it's, everybody thinks that this is a good deal, but the unknowns are just so, and again, from the financial standpoint, the unknowns are scary without having a lot of cash in the piggy bank. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I guess, you know, the characterization that this is a leap of faith, I don't think is true. I mean, this is primarily a land purchase. If we have to upgrade the septic system, the campground's not going to operate, and then we have a land purchase. So when we're talking about unknowns, I mean, it's really important to talk about what it is that we're buying here. We're not buying a business. We've agreed to operate the campground so long as we receive the appropriate waivers. We're going to have to renegotiate that. But, you know, purchasing land, purchasing property, there's the longer it takes for a property to close, the more likely the deal is to fall apart. I mean, it's much more often to have to compete in the marketplace. I mean, we were fortunate enough to, through the Affordable Housing Trust, reach agreement with the Gauthiers before this property went on the market. And all you have to look is like 2 miles down the road at the development at Cedar Banks Landing to see that it's a potentially highly profitable piece of land. That parcel is about 5.5 acres, and 1-bedroom condominiums are priced at $690,000. You know, there are unknowns as far as, you know, how much revenue we'd be able to generate with the campground. But we do know that the campground will not operate if we have to install a septic system. I mean, that is essentially the contingency. So the unknowns are, from a financial perspective, are, you know, what is the development going to look like in the future? There's no way we could do that due diligence in the time that it takes to purchase a piece of land. We cannot expect that the sellers are going to hold on to this parcel of land. This land was fairly near to going up onto the market to be sold to private developer. So I don't think the characterization of a leap of faith is correct at all. I frankly disagree with that. The amount of due diligence that's been done on this parcel thus far, I mean, it's not typical for that to happen. I mean, if you look at the sea camps, all those things. A lot of times property comes up and it has to go immediately into town meeting. You saw that with the Hidilta purchase. And, you know, we've also had situations where the town has hemmed and hawed and had a bunch of public discussion about purchasing a property, brought it to town meeting, got a vote without any plan of what to do with it, and then had the property bought out from under us because we didn't have a purchase and sale agreement going in to a town meeting vote. We did not try and push this into a spring town meeting. Obviously, the timing's not great, but you know, we don't have control over the timing. It's our obligation as a select board to really bring the voters the opportunity that is here in front of us. And
So, Michael, at that point, if you don't
Yeah.
mind me interrupting,
sure, yeah, just wanted to
Yeah.
speak about the unknowns and how they're really relative to the operations of the campground.
okay, so I'm gonna push back a little bit on
Mhm.
that. I'm gonna push back on some of your assumptions just a little bit, because my
Sure.
feeling is if you have opposing arguments and different views, you get a better outcome.
Sure.
So I'm gonna push back a little bit. When you say that this is a land purchase, if this was strictly a land purchase, all of the mitigation would be understood and the cost of that would be understood before, and that becomes a negotiating point between the buyer and the seller. When you say that we're not buying the business, we are buying the business, because in some right, if we're gonna run it for 6 years, we need to understand the costs, if there's revenues available to offset the debt or offset the operating costs. We need to understand what those costs are. So you kind of can't have it both ways and say, this is just strictly a land purchase but we're not buying the business. But the business is an integral part of the financial makeup of how the package is going to operate. So again, we all understand the importance of affordable housing, but we're trying to get to the details of how do we mitigate the unknown to the point where it's acceptable risk. And there's going to be risk at everything. But again, there's still some unknowns. If we had 6 more months on this, I would probably feel much better. I'd like to get that phase 2 done and understand the cost, if there is any ground contamination that needs to be mitigated. And I'd like to get an independent person to look at the tax returns, not share them with the public. I understand why we don't have them. It's not, the Gothiers shouldn't have to make their business public. I get that. Let's have an independent person look at those and determine, and then let's have the DEP take a couple of months so we can maybe anticipate what that cost might look like. And again, there's no room for error in this. There's no contingency in the budget. There's no money. So okay, I'm gonna stop there. I've said that enough times. Anybody else want to raise their hand? Richard Robichaud, go ahead. You have to take yourself off mute, Richard. Do you want to write it on a big whiteboard and hold it up to the camera?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, now
Yes, you are
There we go.
now.
Thank you.
Okay, we signed the purchase and sale agreement on the 18th of April. We formed a committee of a lot of private citizens who are not employed by the town. We set up a website called wellfleethousing.org. I doubt if Stephen or some of the other people who spoke tonight have even looked at that website, because that details everything that has been done to date, all the financials, all the contingencies and everything. What we didn't know was that the Board of Health was out of the picture at this point. It's going to be the DEP. We now know that. Worst case scenario, they shut the campground down. We own it. We can sell it for $8 to $10 million, and the town will be in much better financial situation than it is now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Oh, I'd
Anybody
like
else?
to know, Richard, where'd you get that estimate of $8 million?
The Gothiers have had offers of that amount.
Oh, okay.
So again, an offer is going to be contingent on that due diligence and understanding what you have to take over what you have to. take over.
Exactly. Everybody knows
That's all
that.
part of the
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yeah, but when you're dealing with a private sale as opposed to a municipality, it's always different. Municipalities always involve more negotiation than a private house sale.
No, I understand that. I understand that municipalities do everything backwards, and I get it.
Okay,
Anybody have any other questions, comments? I don't know if we're ready for a vote. I'd like to hear from my board if they have anything left. Ira, Stephen, you guys.
So $6.5 million. This does not mean we're buying it. This means we are able to buy it. Am I right?
That's the purchase price.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that we're buying it. It means that you're going to go back into negotiations and decide if it's the best for the town to buy it.
That's correct. It's an authorization. Sorry, Kathy.
No, go
It's an
ahead, Michael.
it's an authorization to purchase. It's not the actual purchase. We still have to close on the property, which means we have to we have to reach a agreement to realize to resolve the contingencies that can't be met.
Okay. One other thing that I hadn't really thought about until this meeting. If the Gauthiers, or I'm going to say the sellers, if the sellers have not fixed up their septic system since 2005, what is the condition of all the rest of the buildings, et cetera, and how are we going to pay for that? And has that been inspected, et cetera?
Yeah, so Kathy, can I?
Yep.
So yeah, that due diligence was done. There's all the there's a 6-year capital improvement layout where the conditions of the buildings, they have been fairly well maintained, but you can view all that information on the website, and it has been published by the financial review. Oh no, the due diligence for grounds and maintenance. So everything from roofs to electrical to everything like that. And it's important to note that these are non-compliant systems. They're not failed systems. These systems are pumped and inspected every year, visually inspected, and they are functioning systems. They've been grandfathered by the fact that it has not been transferred. So they maintain their systems on an annual basis, which is why they have lasted so long. And the proof in the pudding, really, of that there's a public water supply on this property that it's tested. I don't know the exact amount. I think it's monthly or quarterly water tests that test for nitrates, bacterial, all forms of contamination, and none of those tests have ever come back above the acceptable levels. And the nitrogen level has been below the threshold, far below the threshold of like many private wells in areas where there's Title V systems. So, we know what we're getting. And I think, the fact is we aren't purchasing a business. Like, I know that Kathy pushed back on that, and I agree.
Okay, excuse me for interrupting, but he's just going to go on about stuff he already spoke about. Can we go to the question?
Wait a minute, let's let Michael finish, and just let Michael finish out of.
Okay.
Thank you. And then we'll, we're gonna get some votes pretty quick.
Yeah, I'll just get to the point. So,
Go ahead, Michael.
essentially what we're asking is to authorize the financing and for the purchase, and then the select board still has room to negotiate the terms on which we go forward.
And again, everybody, let's just remember that we're gonna recommend or not recommend or abstain. We're gonna do our vote. This still has to go to town meeting, and then I do believe it needs does it need a majority vote, or does it need a 2/3 vote at town meeting?
2/3.
2/3
Two-thirds.
vote. So we're, we're not gonna make or break the deal right now, how many people are gonna ask the FinCom what they think about it? I don't know. But this is eventually gonna be what our purpose is to bring the vote on the best information that we have as a financial board, whether we're comfortable authorizing this, and ultimately it will be decided on a vote. I don't know if that helps anybody get past
Um,
any.
Kathy, if I may, and then Gary has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I'd like, if it's something new, that would be
Yep,
great,
it's
but
new.
what I'd like to do is I'd really like to get, because we have to vote for the rest of the warrant tonight, the speaker needs
Yep.
that, so I appreciate the input, but if we can stick it to something that has numbers on it, that will
Yep.
resolve some of our questions, I'd appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan, go ahead.
So, just briefly, there's two quick things. So in terms of the conditions of the buildings and the grounds, those inspections were performed by the building inspector, the wire inspector, plumbing inspector, and a member of the water commission. So that was all done by qualified personnel. In terms of the impact of the campground, or the monies expected from the campground operations, that's kind of a bonus. It only represents 6 2/3% of the overall financing for the property. It's a nice thing to have, but it is not integral to the financial the financial planning for the spending for the campground. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm just trying to think, first of all, we can all envision a wonderful property that we could build houses on. The reality is that we've looked for years. Many people who have no vested interest other than the welfare of the town have looked and worked on this project, and they think this is the best bet that we have. So we have to deal with. This is the reality that we have before us. And so as I hear your concerns, it seems to me that the two that are the most compelling are the septic liability and the environmental liability. Is that correct?
No,
Yeah,
wasn't-
but there
it
are
wasn't
others.
my,
There are, but
I understand, but I'm just trying to get to where can we make common ground?
there,
Or what is
I
it
think-
that you would like to see in the contingencies that would allay some of your concerns?
I would like to have had a independent financial review done with, that I asked for early on of the tax returns. I'd also like to have the phase 2 completed, so we have a hard number on mitigation. And I'd like the DEP to get in this a little bit longer. And I'd like to have free cash certified, and I'd like to make sure that there are enough funds in the town. These are my concerns. I'd like to
Right.
make sure there are enough funds in the town to take care of the current projects, and we're not giving up something that's an immediate need that we have overlooked because it hasn't been brought to our attention, because you can only spend that money in the piggy bank once. So I don't know if anybody has any more information on or needs any more questions on the campground. I think what is unknown is unknown, and we're going to take a vote based on what is unknown at this point, and whether we're comfortable enough to authorize the spending. And again, this is going to ultimately go to town meeting, and we'll, as a board, we can hash it out all night long, but we're going to ultimately abide by what the voters choose to do. And we will share our information that we have based on what we've gone over, if people ask. And I just want to make sure that my board feels comfortable, if they're taking a vote, that they don't have any questions that they feel will impact the ability to make a decision tonight when we talk about these next 3 articles. So that would be my ask of you guys on the board. You all, are you good?
Yeah, I think I am.
I am.
I would like to move that the finance committee recommend that the purchase be made.
Well,
No.
hang on, Mo, because we have 3 articles. So this discussion is informational, so that we can move through the warrant and vote on the 3 articles, because there's 3 of them. And let's go to, if we can go to those, let's go to 6, 7, and 8. And I would like Rich to stay on in case they have questions. Oh, did you leave? Just in case we have questions on how those funding, why those articles are written the way they are, I'd like to ask Rich. So if you guys are ready for a vote on 6, Article 6.
Okay.
Can I,
Can you-
I'm really sorry, I'm not home. I don't have the warrant in front of me. If you can just give me the title of it, I'll know what I need to do.
Yep. Let me get to it. Hang on. I think I pulled them out.
It's article number 6, acquisition of the campground property.
Yep, acquisition of the campground property is number 6.
So Mo's making a motion, I
I was
gather.
making a motion to recommend.
Yes,
Okay. All those in favor?
Wait,
say
was there
I
a
aye.
need
second?
Oh,
No
I'm
sec-
sorry,
I didn't
Iris
have
second.
I'll
Iris
second.
seconds. Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Jeff, I can't see you. Mo, Ira, in favor? All those opposed?
You better do
Opposed?
a voice vote, because
Okay, voice, I'm sorry, voice vote. Jeff, Behrens? 4 opposed
Sorry,
or abstain?
What was that?
I lost it.
let's start. Can we start all over again?
Yep, let's do this. Okay, Mo, Jeff, you're like in outer space. Mo recommended, Ira seconded. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay,
Aye.
Stephen is an aye. All those opposed? Jeff, what are you? Jeff, can you put your thumb up or down? We're working through tech issues.
I love Zoom.
opposed,
He
Oh, Jeff-
froze.
Jeff's opposed.
opposed.
I am
Opposed,
opposed.
okay.
I'm not seeing it.
I'm sorry. Jeff is opposed. I am opposed.
I'm opposed as well.
You're opposed, Stephen?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 3 to
3 to 2.
3 to 2.
The
Okay.
motion fails.
Motion fails.
I move that we not recommend Article 6, the acquisition of the campground property.
That's what we just did, Stephen.
To not recommend or to recommend? I thought Mo
Not-
wanted to recommend.
You
Well, if
voted,
it'll appear on the warrant as recommended 2 to 3.
yeah, it'll appear on recommend. It'll say Mo and well, not the 2, it'll say two recommended and 2 opposed, or 3 opposed.
No, that's not how it works. The motion doesn't pass, so you have to revote it.
No,
Dale's correct. I believe you need an affirmative
Yes, you need a
motion.
new, I know, yeah. So
Oh,
I
okay,
move that
Stephen,
we
so go
not
ahead. So what do we
recommend
have to
Article
do?
number 6.
So you vote to
I
not
recommend,
recommend.
I move that we not recommend Article number 6, the acquisition of the campground property.
Okay, and I am in favor of not recommending that.
Oh,
So
wait,
there
is
you need
there
a
a second?
second.
I'm sorry, Jeff second?
I second, yes.
Okay.
All those, so we're not recommending it. All in favor of
Right.
not recommending it.
All of those in favor of not recommending, vote.
Me,
That's an
Jeff,
aye.
Stephen, Mo and
And
I. are in
I.
favor. Okay,
Okay. So that's 3.
okay, so then we're gonna do Article 7.
Well, now we need to be opposed.
Okay.
Kathy, Kathy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I can't really make out what everybody's saying. So what is the final vote on not to recommend?
Okay,
3 to 2.
3 to 2.
Thank you.
You
Sorry.
got it. All right. Sorry about that. Hey, this is my first fun meeting. All right.
You're doing great, Kathy. It's a hard meeting.
Yeah,
You're doing
Kathy, you're
great.
doing a good job.
You're doing a
all
good
right,
job.
Number 7 is the campground preservation housing restriction. The town will vote to appropriate $1.5 million to apply the funds to the purchase of Maurice's campground. So this is another campground.
So I move that we not recommend Article number 7, community preservation Maurice's campground housing restriction.
I am in favor of not recommending.
So am I.
Can I just ask for a roll call vote here? If you could just go over the names and
Yep.
then vote, just so we
Stephen
get
is on Dale's iPad, Rich. So Stephen is not recommending. Kathy, I am not recommending. Jeff is not recommending. Jeff Barron,
Jeff is correct, yes.
Mo.
I am recommending.
Me
Mo
too.
and
Ira
Ira
is recommended.
Okay. So 3-2 to not recommend.
Right, okay.
Okay. Article 8, this is the operational costs.
I move that we not recommend Article number 8, Maurice's Campground operational costs.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Jeff seconds. I am favor of not recommending. Mo. Article 6.
Opposed.
You're opposed.
I'm
to-
voting no about not recommending.
Okay. So you're recommending. You should see my notes. They're fabulous. Ira, how do you feel about this one?
I'm voting no to not recommending.
Never had so many double negatives. I tried to get out of my homework. All right, I think, so we're good on that. We have a couple of, thank you all. I think that takes care of the 3 campgrounds. My guys don't leave because we got a couple more to do.
Yep.
And then we have a couple of little discussions, to happen. So, we left off Article.
Kathy,
5.
Rich has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and you're probably getting into it now, just to let you know that there were two others that weren't voted on. Seems like you're going in that direction. I have Article 5 that does not have a vote. And we also have Article, I believe it's 19, are the last two.
Yeah, I have 5, and that's what I was gonna talk about. 19, we didn't know if we, do you need one on 11? That's where we were gonna go, because we gotta finish these up. Dan wants them tomorrow.
Lease of town property.
Yeah, so that's where I was going. So number 5, the flora and fauna, big contentious. It's always the big contentious ones. John Reel has been replaced by John Duane on the Natural Resources Committee. For this number 5, this is the $50,000 for the flora and fauna grant.
75,000.
Number 5. Did I say that right? Wrong? Thank you. Steve.
It's number 5, but it's 75,000 now.
75, okay. So we have a new natural resource board person. They have been in contact with SPAT, but SPAT hasn't given them a decision yet because they are in their busy season. So Rich had his hand up. I was gonna ask Rich.
Sorry to jump in here.
Is that your hand or giving us the? There should be that emoji on there.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm that, while you guys are discussing this is one of those articles that comes from free cash that will be indefinitely postponed. So it will not be heard at that meeting. Obviously, you guys probably should still vote on it. I mean, select board had or not, but it will not be, voted on at town meeting.
Okay, so
that
I'm
was
gonna move not to recommend.
Wait, that was exactly, can I give you 2 seconds of, I was gonna ask you about
Sure.
that. So anything that I'll ask that later. So they have been in contact for SPAT. It's not gonna be funded anyway, so I would vote to hold off on this one and bring it up in the spring and to see either we get money or maybe SPAT throws something.
Don't even bother voting, just move on to the next one.
So how do you do that? Do you just abstain? Did we?
Don't
take a
vote,
vote?
because as Rich said, it's not going to be a town meeting, so.
I think you would reflect that there was no recommendation.
Okay,
So all those in favor?
That sounds good to me.
So
Me
what do
too.
we do? So Rich, what do we do on that one? We just abstain?
We vote no recommendation at this point.
I would just do a vote for a no recommendation.
Okay. All those in favor of no recommendation?
aye.
Aye.
I
5-0. Aye.
Still think you need a move and a second.
Oh, sorry.
I'll
I meant
second
to
it.
jump through that. Ira seconded.
So moved.
Thank you. I love you guys.
Well, you can have dessert first. It's fine.
Exactly. Cake for
Um,
breakfast.
Yay.
Hey, Kathy,
Um,
just,
Yep, what do you,
Not-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I just wanted to let you know, it's perfectly acceptable to just take no action on them as well.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but
Teach the new
thank you.
kid. Do you want to vote? Do we need to vote on 11? That's Lisa Town property, Rich. Do we need that?
You know, on the unofficial minutes, I have Article 11 as motion Ira Wood to approve Article 11.
Yeah, I
Second.
think we did do that.
Okay. Is that 9-0?
Yep.
Cool beans. Okay, and do we need one on the last one I think was 19. Do we need one on the non-binding for?
You do. You had requested Suzanne come to your next meeting and kind of give you some of the history behind it, whether there's some revenue loss with this, you know, vote. It is non-binding. It will be something that would come back in a future one. But that's where the board had left, what was to ask ask Suzanne to come back and just give a little financial history behind it. So
Okay.
she's on tonight if you have any questions.
Is she still here? Okay.
I am.
Suzanne, can you give us a quick rundown on how much what the differential would be between, on 19 for, from a revenue standpoint? That would be great.
It won't impact the revenue at all because LeCount Hollow has always been a sticker beach. And what we're doing is we're changing the kind of sticker for that beach. So our pay beaches revenue would remain stable. And we have been doing this on an annual temporary basis since 2020. This last summer was our third summer doing it, and it hasn't had an impact on the number of cars in the lot and or the revenue that I can tell.
Okay. Can I ask, so I would be in favor of you exploring this again, if it's something that the town wants, because I'm not going to be the arbiter. It should go up to the people that want to vote for the way they want their town. I would just add, if you could just maybe ask when you're doing the due diligence on this, that if you ask the guest houses and motels if they're seeing customer impact from that, because I would hate to impact our customers negatively if they see that as a negative. So as part of your due diligence, I'd love to have them involved as well.
All right, there is negative feedback from at least one motel.
Okay. Okay.
And we know it's not your motel, Kathy, because you don't own it
I
anymore.
sold mine. Whoop, whoop.
It's not a Kathy motel, no.
I have a question though. I mean, permanent change to town beaches rules and regulations. I mean, can't the rules and regulations always be changed? I mean, you can't do a
Yeah,
permanent thing.
What the background is, we had a temporary vote in 2020 because it was a response to the pandemic. 2021, we were still in pandemic mode. And then this year,
Oh, okay.
I proposed to amend the beach rules and regulations. It went down to a 2-2 vote. And then because of public outcry, it came back to the board and they voted 5-0 to do it for a third summer. It is inefficient to have an annual vote on something, and it would be more effective to have it in the rules and regulations.
Yeah, and I don't know why are we weighing in on this? It doesn't have, you said it does not have a financial impact on the town.
Well, I think the question was whether there was a financial impact, and the answer is there is.
There is, or there?
There is no financial impact.
Suzanne, I have a quick question. If this was a sticker-only beach, would we have a beach attendant there, or would it be somebody that drives by and gives tickets once an hour?
Oh, no, we have a beach
It's
attendant there.
guarded. Yeah.
It's the lifeguards are there, and we've had Dana there since time immemorial, and he was still there for the last couple of summers. So
No, I'm just penny pinching. I'm thinking if it's a if it's a sticker only, a residence only sticker beach, then we could give up the paying the town attendant and put some stickers on some of those people sneaking in.
No, because people
No.
cheat. You can't, you have to have a vehicle by vehicle assessment of whether they have the sticker, unfortunately.
All right,
Kathy, can I recommend that we take no action on this?
So moved.
second,
I'll second.
yep, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
I,
Way to
Thanks,
go,
Mo.
Mo.
that's 5-0, take no action. Thanks, Michael, for the tip. Cool. All right, you guys, we are at, how much longer, and I'm opening this up, very democratic, how much longer do you want to go? Should we talk about, let's talk about the 2023 meeting schedule, if we can. I just hate doing this because most of the people aren't here tonight, but let's get so we have the opportunity to schedule our, finance committee meetings, and I know what I want to do is I want to try to get them scheduled as far out as possible for our benefit, as well as those that have business to come before us. So we have the option of, and Karen's going to weigh in here. Karen, we have the option of the second or fourth Wednesday of the month, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Well, this is on you, girl.
I know, I
Um,
can't remember. It's too late. I had a late night last night. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What, hold on, let me look at my calendar.
See,
And then
when the planning
I
board-
apologize.
Whenever the planning board goes, we go opposite. So does
Right, you
anyone-
have even. So the 14th and the 28th of September would be yours.
Okay, so
Wednesday.
do we have a preference on the fourth, on the second Wednesday or the fourth Wednesday of each month?
think I would prefer I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I think the fourth is better,
Okay,
but I'm not hard. I'm not gonna fight for that.
hang on, I'm
You're
getting
easy.
my calendar.
For that, yeah.
So if you have the fourth, then that's perfect. We may have to jockey some around sometimes if
Sure.
meetings come up and do that. But Karen, if you can schedule, let's look at the fourth Wednesday of the month. That was easy, easy. So Jerry will be happy. I think I'm gonna skip over liaison scheduling tonight because half of them aren't there. But while we have
Yep.
Rich here, what I'd like to do is Rich asked me how we have done, and Stephen, you're gonna probably be pretty instrumental in this. Explaining how we've done the budget, because right after this town meeting, we're gonna go into budget season. So next meeting, I'll confirm all the liaison reports, and then we'll start making plans to do the budget. But what I was telling Rich before is each one of our members, each one of the board members, Rich, has a department that they are liaisons to. And what they do in your budget, the select board and the TA own the budget. Our finance committee does not develop the budget. We review and recommend. So each one of our liaisons has had schedules that they schedule time with their department head. And then what they do is they talk about their budgets and what they need and get explanations on why certain funding appears or if there's something anomalous. Occasionally, the police chief and the fire chief always like to schedule time ahead of us. So once that budget book comes out, these guys all meet with their individual liaisons and go over the budget and bring that information back to the finance committee. So we don't necessarily have to meet with every department head. So we would be looking at your, how you're scheduling your budget, first ride through, and see how you're scheduling your budget to make sure that we're not taxing the department heads with a lot of different meetings where they have to explain their story over and over again.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know if we actually have a public meeting with the finance committee with each individual budget to have you weigh in. But from what I'm understanding is you actually work with them through the liaison, and then we have a public process with the select board. And I'm seeing from previous town or annual town meeting schedules and election schedules that typically the select board and FinCom hold a joint meeting at some point throughout the budget process.
We do.
That used to be the way, but it kind of went by the wayside.
Okay.
We had
Yeah,
some
but-
members who wanted to only meet with department heads at the FinCom. My preference is if you're kind of have them meet, you might as well meet while the selectmen are there, but there's no like.
So
hard
what we
fast.
do, what we've done is we found that that joint meeting really doesn't give us the opportunity to get in depth. So what we do is we'll take the bigger budgets, we parse them up. We might do, so the liaisons come back after the budget's been developed, and what they do is there'll be our schedule, our agenda will be, tonight will be fire and police. And, you know, some of them, maybe we throw in a smaller department. And then we'll have health and human services. And so we split them up, and we usually go in January, February. I think we go to like 2 meetings a month so that we can get all the department heads. If they feel, they'll know when our FinCom is scheduled, and they'll be able to pop in if they feel they need to explain something to us. If we have questions, we may invite them in. But that's the way that we do that budget process. In 1 4-hour meeting with the FinCom and the select board with all of the department heads trying to do a budget, I'd rather poke a stick in the eye, and we don't get really good information out of that. So we kind of have somebody that sits in and helps with the development so that they can answer questions. And
Plus,
we will,
yeah.
go ahead, Ira.
No, I was just going to say that our big departments, the department heads have been really good at detailing every
Yeah.
item that needs to
We're
be
very
detailed.
lucky.
That really helps.
It's good to hear. I think my goal here is I know the last 2 years have almost been like a fire drill throughout the budget process. So I'm hoping that we can get back into an organized schedule, to get back where we actually can get back on town meeting schedules and actually get back to normal. I mean, it's been kind of an upsetting couple of years, and we need to return to normal. So we're working on a schedule now. I mean, this is what it looks like. We got a draft, and we're hoping to get that out pretty soon to our departments to have them review and get some sense and get their feedback, and then we'll share it with the committees and boards on what that schedule looks like.
And I think we have time to put, because we're with Linda gone, we're gonna need to look at liaisons to make sure all the departments are covered, and we can look at that next time when we have a larger amount of our board here. Is everybody set with that one? Can I move on to strategic?
Sure.
planning? So we'll be in touch. Yeah, we'll go into that a little bit more next meeting. So strategic planning, I think I'm going to pull that off of the agenda for tonight again, because Fred's really the spearhead for that. But I will like to just tell Rich that the finance committee in the last few years has tried to put some strategic planning goals together. I'm really kind of happy that we have a planner on the select board now. We've kind of been, things have come up that we haven't anticipated. You know, things like, oh, dredging, we forgot about that. So it has been a topic of conversation for us to try to strategic plan with some of the 5 and 10 year bigger ticket items that are going to come up. I think that's a good, I like the process. I like understanding it. Maybe that might be something where Rebecca is, you know, writing grants and doing good things that she's doing, that we can involve whoever you have. I imagine it was Rebecca, but I assume whoever you have in the strategic planning department work with the finance committee as on, you know, not every meeting, but occasional meetings so that we know, we can anticipate as a finance committee what's coming up. And I think after we get through this town meeting, we'll probably be looking at you and Nick for some of the reports that are going to be starting to be generated that we're going to want to see on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. I'll
that
look
make
forward to
sense?
that. I mean, we don't have a strategic, planning department, but I get what you're saying, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, it's always good to have a projection in the future. They can change, we can adjust them, and it's just, good practice.
So I think some of that started and goes kind of hand in hand along with the liaison meetings while they're meeting about budgets. It's kind of like, hey, what do you see coming up for big, scary goals that you think you're going to need for capital items so that we can anticipate that? Stephen, did you have a question?
No, I don't think so.
Anybody have, do we have any correspondence or any, I know I rushed through all of that. Again, I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast.
You did great.
Ira,
You
No
did a good
apologies.
job, very good
No
job.
apologies.
thank you.
I
So
have a-
Karen, do we have, oh, I'm sorry. Richard?
Yes, there are other members of the finance committee. Is there any reason why they're not here tonight? Are they unable to Zoom or what? What's the question? I
Yeah,
don't
no,
understand.
they have been excused. They have, each of them has a very good reason for not being here that I don't think is in my purview this year, but it was unexpected that we had a couple not here.
Because this is a pretty important meeting. I just wondered why they weren't there, that's all.
It is not an intentional, we're not gonna show up at that meeting. If I can let you know that.
Would you
Okay,
like their email addresses?
I have them.
So why don't you just email them?
And I would suggest, Stephen, that you go on wellfleethousing.org because that has
I
everything
already
about
did,
Maurice's.
Rich, but I'm too busy working to pay taxes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, guys. Hey, all right. So Karen,
Yeah, I
any
think we're done here.
correspondence, anything else, any other
No.
business that we need to take
No,
care of?
nothing. No.
Awesome. Do you guys want to adjourn before 9:20? I think my
So
body
moved.
average is 2 hours.
Holy cow. Oh, it's only 8:45. Great.
I know, but I figured, but last time, I took you a little bit longer. Fred was a little jealous of that. So if we want to adjourn, somebody can make a motion to do
No, I
that.
want to go watch football.
Thank you. Rich.
Most,
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Ryan. Stephen,
thanks, yep, adjourn.
Thank you.
bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Rich. Bye, everybody.